Hilchas Zchiach U'Matanah Perek Shnei Moser. Now we learned before in Hilchim Perek Vav that a case of Kol Nechasav Libnoi, a person has a number of sons, and he writes all his Nechasim to one of the sons, so we nemon that Leaso El Apotropos. We don't nemon that he really wanted that this son should get everything. It was Leaso El Apotropos. That din is only by sons. L'mashal, if it would be daughters, and he writes all his nechasim to one of the daughters or to one of his brothers, which are yashning him, so then it's a good matana, and memela, that person is the only one that receives all the nechasim. Masha'enken by ben abonim, there's a special din that le'aso el apotropos. Now that din is only by a koisef. Masha'enken l'mashal shchiv mirah, which says before he dies that this ben should be the Yerush. So we learn out from a pasuk, v'haya b'yem hanchile esbonov, that a person could be manchel and decide who should be the one that should be Yerush. Even though mikra the dinner they're all Yarshim, all the banim are Yarshim, but he could choose the Yerush, that this ben should be the Yerush. Now there is any Yarshim, he could choose who should be the Yerush. That's only talking about that he's not taking away the Yerusha from the Pcher. If there's a Pcher involved, so then that din wouldn't apply. But this is talking about in a case when there's no Pcher involved, so then, and you're not taking away the Yerusha from the Pcher, so then you could go and say one of the Yarshim should be the Yerush. And that din is only a Shchiv Mirah and not by a Bari. That's the halacha we learned in the beginning. Perek Shnei Moser. Shchiv Mirah Sha'omar, B'ni Pleini Yirasheni. He said that this particular son, he has a number of sons, this son should be the Yerush. So the din is Hareze Yerush Eisel Avadi, so he becomes the Yerush. And V'lei Yerushu Shar Bonim, and the other sons aren't the Yerushim. V'chein Imamar Al Bez Ben Abonis, of his Yershim Abonis, and he says Al Baz Ben Abonis, Yach Ben Achim Ishar Yershim, and he says that one of them should be the Yerush, and he's a Shchiv Mirah, Dvar of Kayom. Aval Habari, this din is only a Shchiv Mirah, B'yei Manchili is Bonav at the time when he's being Manchel, which is when he's a Shchiv Mirah. Aval Habari ain't Dvar of Kayom. That's the number one. Halacha Gimel. Shchiv Mirah Sha'omar, Nechasai Lepleini, V'achar Rav Lepleini. In other words, I want my nechasim to go to this person, and after that person dies, I want those nechasim to be transferred to someone else. Not to his Yarshim, not to the Pleini's Yarshim, to someone else. So this din is, Ein L'Sheni Ela Mashashir Rishon. Whatever is left over from the Rishon, so that's what goes to the Sheni. That's talking about if the person is only a Mekabel, in other words, he's not a Yerush. However, if this person that he said Nechasi Lepleini was someone that was royal Yarshe Kigain Shoye Ben Bechlal Abonim, so then Ein L'Sheni Klum. Knows why? Because Shekol Loshen Matana L'Yerush Hareu Koloshen Yerusha. That's what we learned before, that when a Shchiv Mirah gives something as Matna Shchiv Mirah to a Yerush, so then it gets, the person receives it, the Teres Yerusha. Even though he said a Loshen Matana, but Lepel, the Yerush receives something, he receives it, the Teres Yerusha. And the din is v'Yerusha in lehefsik. V'afal pi sha'ama v'achrav leplein. And we mentioned this earlier. In other words, when a person gives something to someone, and that person is not a Yerush, so then he can give it to him and say, I'm giving it to you as long as you're alive. But acharecha, once you pass on, so then it goes leplein. So that's a regular din. Masha'enken, if someone is yarshning it, if someone is receiving it as Yerusha, so once that person is Yerush, you have no really right to say v'achrav. So if you're giving it as potatoes matana, so then you could say v'achrav. Masha'enken, if that person is receiving it potatoes Yerusha, so you lose your rights to it, and memela it remains to pleini, and the fact that you're saying achrecha to someone else is kilu amasna mashakos batera, and it's bottle what you're saying. So when a person says something, b'matan shchiv mirah, saying that it should go lepleni, and that pleni is a Yerush. So even though you said it b'loshen matana, so lepel it has a din of Yerusha. No, since he's royally Yorshe, it has a din of Yerusha. And what do you accomplish by the din of Yerusha? The accomplish is that by saying va'achrav lepleni is meaningless, because since he received the potatoes Yerusha, so that's the rule that Yerusha in lehefsik. Halacha hey, that's talking about when you're giving it potatoes Yerusha. Aval habari shenosan matnus bari al derech zeh. This was a shchiv. This was a shchiv mirah that said b'loshen matana, and when a shchiv mirah says something b'loshen matana, so then it has a din of Yerusha, and therefore va'achrav l'plein doesn't work. If the person wasn't a shchiv mirah, he was a bari, and because of nechasi lecha V'achrecha lepleni is ein l'sheni el mashasheni rishon, and that's ben shehaya rishon roy liyarshe, ben shlehoya roy liyarshe. In other words, when a shchiv mirah gives something to someone that's roy liyarshe, see, even though he said a lashon of matana, so we say that the lashon of matana, when a shchiv mirah gives it to someone that's roy liyarshe, as a din of Yerusha, and therefore the va'achrev l'pleni is not chal. Masha'enkin, when a bari gives something to someone, so then that he's giving a regular matana. He's giving a matana and he's saying achrav l'pleni. And even though that person is royally yarsha, but l'peli is not giving it b'teiros Yerusha. He's giving it b'teiros matnas bari, which is a matana. So Memela, once he gives it b'teiros matnas bari, which are matana, so then he has the right to say achrav l'pleni. So l'chura devaila was saying that by a shchiv mirah, if the person is royally yarsha, so then for sure you can say achrav l'pleni. And by a bari, even if he's royally yarshe, you could say achrav l'pleni. Now the Rambam says halacha vav. Now shchiv mirah, by shchiv mirah, it's also possible that he should give it to someone that's royally yarshe, and he should be able to say achrav l'pleni. Shchiv mirah shama nechasei lecha. I'm giving my nechasim to you v'achrecha l'pleni, and lepeil v'hoya rishon royally yarshe. So l'chura, as we just learned, that then that person lechura you don't say v'achrav l'pleni. Abalapel, this shchiv mirah is pirash v'amar. He said clearly, lei mishum Yerusha nineson lecha she'ein lehefsek. I'm not giving you b'teiros Yerusha, and then I won't be able to say v'achrav l'pleni. Ela b'matana, I'm giving it to you b'teiros matana, not b'teiros Yerusha. B'harei if saktia and memela I was mafsik the matana, and I'm saying that the matana is chal only until he dies. And then it shouldn't be nimshach to his yorshim, it should be nimshach lepleni. So the din is hasheni keinem hashim mishayir arishon. The sheni is keinem hashim mishayir arishon. The fichach is the result of that. Im nasan hamoyis ayidat sholish. A person gives his money to a sholish. Esha Amar tunu lebonai shekel b'chol Shabbos. He said, "Give my children a shekel b'chol Shabbos." Abavlei mishum Yerusha in Islam. I don't want them to yashin it. Abavahanishem and nechasim. After they die, lepleni. So in other words, he has nechasim, and lepel, his children are going to be nana from those nechasim, but he's giving it biyat sholish, and he's saying that I don't want that they should really yashin these nechasim. I don't want them to yashin these nechasim. I want that after they die, it should be lepleni. Is the din is ein noisnulem el shekel in such a case? Even though the Rambam said before that when he says that you should only give him a shekel, so we say you give them more if they need more. That's only talking about because be'etzem they're the Yorshim. It's just even though he left a tzavah, that you should only give him a shekel, we assume that the tzavah was only in order because he didn't want them to spend a lot of money unnecessarily. Masha'inkin over here, this money is destined to be for someone else. Because right now this money should be used for his children, and when they die, he wants that this money should go lepleni, and he's saying beferish that they shouldn't yashin it. It's not their money. It's money that I'm only giving it to them for them to use, but eventually I want it to be able to go to someone else. This is Neislam el shekel. So Memelis, since he instructed that you should give them the shekel, so therefore in Neislam el shekel, so the chiddush over here is that even though a person is a shchiv mirah, and lepel he's giving it to someone that's royally yarshay, but on the other hand, he could clearly stipulate, he could clearly mention that this shouldn't be b'teiras Yerusha, even though stam regular matana of a shchiv mirah to a Yerush has a din of Yerusha, but he could say clearly it shouldn't have a din of Yerusha, and therefore there should be a din of achrav l'pleni. So that's this din. The Rambam says two tziyur. He says im nosen hamoyes ayidat sholish. So it explained that Nosna Moisai de Sholish means he gave it to a Sholish, and the Sholish was instructed to give the Bonai a shekel b'chol Shabbos. And Va'achrav, after the Bonim, it should be given to someone else. So over here, he doesn't have to say V'lei Mishum Yerusha ani Neisnalam Ela Mishum, because he wasn't Neisnalam, he gave it to a Sholish. He gave it to a Sholish, and L'chatchila instructed the Sholish that while they're alive, they should give them a shekel. Mashenk, and once they die, so you should give it to Lepleni. So Fashtates, that's pashut that they want never yashined it. Mashenk, in the next case is Oisha Amar knows he never really gave it to a sholish. He Lepel they yashined it, and Lepel he was saying that Tnu Lebanai, he knows he was saying Kilo Tnu Lebanai, and he was saying over there he said Le Mishum Yerushan Nesalam Ela Mishum Matana. So then over there when it wasn't Lusholish, so then he has to clearly spell out that V'lei Mishum Yerushan Nesalam and V'anishim Am Nechasim Yeh Lepleni. that's when they have the money, when they're really receiving the money. Mashenk in the first case, when he gives it to a shalish, he doesn't have to spell out all these words. Halacha zayin. Nechasei lepleni, a person said nechasei lepleni, not a yesh, va'achrav lepleni, and va'achrav lepleni, so that's a regular case. A person, a shchiv mirah, said nechasei lepleni, and he said va'achrav lepleni, so the din is mesrishin kanasheni. Because lepel, normally, if a person gets nechasim and he dies, so it goes to his yorshim. Mashenkin over here, since he said nechasi lepleni v'achrav lepleni, so when it's mesrishin, it's kanasheni. Mes sheni, now that the sheni dies, is hareelu shel yorshi hasheni, because after the sheni received it, now from now onwards, it belongs to the sheni and to his yorshim. However, mes sheni b'chay yorishin, if the sheni died b'chay yorishin, so then it's yon nechasim shel yorishin. So in other words, the rishon had it, but he had it b'eifun kazed that when he dies, he has to give it to the sheni. That's only if the sheni is there. Mashenkin, if the sheni is not there, so he doesn't have to give it to the sheni. So where does it go? So it goes to the yorshi rishon. So l'chura, the rishon really has a right to do whatever he wants with the nechasim. He could sell it. Once he sells it, so there's nothing for the sheni to have. So the din is aval b'shein l'sheni el mashashir rishon aser l'rishon limker v'litin gufei. The rishon is really not allowed to go ahead and sell it and sell the guf of the he only eats the penis. That would be the pshat, the pashta pshat, and what the shchiv mirah intended to do. In other words, nechasei lepleni, and you should divinely use the penis. But v'achrav, once he dies, is lepleni. You should go over to the second one. So lechatchila, really, he shouldn't sell it. However, halacha tes v'im avar arishin u'macher or v'nosan batan. If lepel he did sell it or he did give it away, is then ein hasheni meitzim yad alakuchas. So even though he said v'achrav lepleni means if it's left by the rishon, so then it goes to the sheni. However, if the rishon taka sold it, even though he shouldn't have sold it, but nevertheless the sheni doesn't get it. She'ein l'sheni leiman aguf v'leiman aperes ela hanisha. The only thing that he's entitled to is only what's left over. And Mamela, since he sold it, so lepel, there's nothing left over. Someone that advises the rishon, go ahead and sell it. And Mamela, you'll have money, and that money you'll give to your yarshim. That's Nikra Rosha. Whatever he does is ma'asav kayom. In other words, even though they're be'an over there, they're still be'an. But lepel, since lepel he sold it or he made him takrich lemes, and now they became osir b'hanoah. So memela, so the sheni doesn't get anything. In other words, the rishon could deal with the nechasim as if it's his. It is his. At this point in time, it's his. The only thing is, right now, it's completely his. And it's only that when he dies, normally when a person owns something, so his yarshim yarshin it. Here he owns it, and he could do whatever he wants with it. But on the other end, once he dies, the yarshim don't yarshin it. So really, lechatchila, he shouldn't sell it. But lepel, if he did sell it or whatever, he was mishachar the evet. So lepel, since it was his at that point in time, so the evet is mishachar. Now, b'medvar mamurim b'shemocher arishin nosin matana lacherim. When do we say that if he sells it or he gives it away, it's considered that it's a done deal, and Mamela the sheni is not going to get it? That's when he sold it to someone else. He gave it to his son, someone that's roy liyorshe, or le'echad miyorshav is liyosa klum. So it's ki'ilu like it's still by the rishus of the original person. And Mamela, that goes into the gather of the achrov. That goes still into the gather of the achrov. In other words, he told him, I'm giving it to you, and once you die, so it goes to someone else. But so if it's still in his possession, so then it goes to someone else. Masha'enkin, if it's no longer in his possession, so it doesn't go into someone else. Now, if he sold it, he gave it to his son, he sold it to his son, so that's still considered that it's in his possession, because he's the Yerush, and therefore, over here, the Yerush, it's working against them, in other words, and therefore, as a result of that, so we still go on the din of V'achar of Leplain. V'cheinem nosnon b'matna shchiv mirah. A person has nechasim, and he was told that nechasi leplaini, va'achrav leplaini, and lepel, this first plaini, gave it away b'matna shchiv mirah. Now, matna shchiv mirah, we know you only kain alachar misa. So memela, when it comes to misa, so then it becomes already va'achrav leplaini. So memela, that other plaini, which the shchiv mirah is giving away for, never gets it. Never gets it. The cheinem nosnom b'matna shchiv mirah, the rishon which got it. And he was told, "Va'achriv ulpleni," received it al tamat nashchiv mira, va'afilu la'acherim, even im nosen mat nashchiv mira knows not only to his own children. We said before, if he gives it away to his children, so then it always goes lepleni. But if not to his children, to someone else, is le'aser klum. She'ein matan shchiv mira koina ela lachar misa. And therefore, ksheyamush is yikna sheni. So when he dies, the sheni is koina, and this person that the shchiv mira gave it away to is not koina, because it's not the shchiv miraz anymore to give it away. It was the shchiv miraz until he died. Masha'enkin, once he dies, it goes lepleni. So Memela, at that point in time, he doesn't have a right to give it away. B'matna shchiv mira. Halacha Yudalef. Hoya choiv alarishin. The first, again, you have Reuven. Reuven gave away a karka to Shimon, and he said after Shimon dies, it should go to Levi. Now, while Shimon is alive, he's Eichel Peiris. But as Shimon sells the karka, so the karka is sold. But the Rvaila, it's Shimon's to use, and or even if he wants to sell it, he could sell it, although he shouldn't. And Lepel, once Shimon dies, it doesn't go to Shimon's Yorshim, it goes to Levi. Now, Hoya Choiv Alarishan, Shimon had a Choiv, like Subasisha. Because he has Nechasim. He has the Nechasim that he received with Matna Shchiv Mira. Is Afal Pi, or whatever, with a Matana, it was giving Matana Lepleni, Va'achrav Lepleni. It doesn't have to be Matna Shchiv Mira. Is Afal Pi Shaharishan Kayam, even though Lepel he's still alive, the violent in the Nechasim areas, but nevertheless, Ein Bezin Magnesim Miguf HaNechasim. You don't go ahead and take away the Guf HaNechasim. Just like we learned before, that you don't sell these Nechasim, you're not supposed to sell these Nechasim, you're not supposed to give it away b'matana. So Huadin, Bezin is not going to mon these Nechasim for the Balchev, or for the Ksubasisha. Elam and HaPeiris Bulvad, Shamalam, you only take from the Peiris. Now, Lepel, if he himself will give it away to the Balchev, or he himself will go ahead and give it away to the Isha, so then it's like selling it, and he shouldn't have done it, but it was done. Masha'enkin, for Bezdin to go ahead and take away this karka is just like he's not supposed to sell the karka. Bezdin is not supposed to take away this karka, not for the Balchev and not for the Ksubasish. Now, Mesorishan, Lepel, the first person died. Ubo Balcheve v'ishte ligbeis menechasim elu. And now, since he died, so they're coming to mon from these nechasim, ein magmalam klum. They have no rights to it. And even if this rishon, the first receiver, in other words, we're talking about Reuven gave it to Shimon, and then it has to go on to Levi. And now Shimon had a chayv, and he made this karka which he received from Reuven as an apoitiki. But Lepel now it's by Levi. Levi is not a Yerush. Levi is not a Yerush of Shimon, and he's also not a Lekuach of Shimon. In other words, if Shimon sells something, so the Balchev, the Isha, could go to Shimon's Lekuches. If Shimon dies, so he could go to Shimon's Yorshim. Over here, Levi is not a Lekech from Shimon, and he's not a Yerush from Shimon. Levi got it from Reuven. It's just that in the interim, Shimon had it in the middle. So there was Shimon, and now that Shimon died, so now it belongs to Reuven. So Memeli, they can't take anything away from Levi. Or he was miyachadit. Einam gave him in the chosim elo em klum. El harein shel sheni. They completely belong to Sheni, which now story is Levi. Notice Levi is the one that received it directly keilu from Reuven. And now that Levi has it, Shimon is complete. They added a picture. So Memela, his Balchev and his Ksubasisha can be mandar all from this karka. Halacha Yud Beis. Shchiv mira sha'oma li'isha pnuya, nechosei loch v'achrayich lepleni. So he tells her, nechosei loch v'achrayich lepleni. And then v'omda v'nisas. Then she got married. So the din is Balchev lekech, or the Baal is lekech. The Baal has the din of lekech. So it's as if she sold these nechasim to someone, and just like we learned before, that in such a case, if you sell it, it remains by the buyer. You don't take it out of the lekech. You're not supposed to sell it, but if you do sell it, it remains by the buyer. So over here also, since she got married, and the Baal has a din of a lekech, so it's kili, he becomes a lekech on the karka, and therefore, ve'ein hasheni meitzi meyad habal. So the sheni, even if she dies. So he said, he gave the Shchimira gave the Isha the Nechasim, and then the Isha died. So the din is Ein Hasheni Meitz Miyad Habal. That's the original din. So it's has a din kilu she sold it. Now this is talking about he told it to her when she was a pnuya. So he told it to her when she was a pnuya, and then she got married. So getting married is if she sold the nechasim. So Memela now nobody could go ahead and take away these nechasim. However, the Omer Lok Shehi Nesua, he told it to her while she was already in Nesua. In other words, she was married, and he gave her these nechasim while she was married. Now, when he gives her the nechasim while she's married, giving her the nechasim means giving her the nechasim while the Baal is whatever the Baal's rights to these nechasim are. That's part of the giving. And from when he said v'achrov. So knows when she wasn't married, so he told her, he gave her the nechasim as a person without not being married. And then he said v'achrecha is to someone else. Lepel, since in the middle she got married, so it's as if she sold the nechasim. Mashenkin over here, he gave it to her while she was already married. So this matzav of being married is the one that he gave it to. And Lepel, he also said v'achrecha. And after you used to be lepleni, and umesa, and then she died. So the din is hasheni meitzim yad habal. So now the sheni could be meitzim yad habal. Why? Because while she was already in a suah, that's how she received the nechasim. That it should be nechasei loch v'achrayach to someone else. Is nimsa kilo amala beferish. It's as if that's what he's saying. I'm not giving it to the Baal. The Baal is not a lekeach right now because the Baal is married already. So Mela, I'm giving it to you, and Lepel, I'm giving it achrayach lepleni. Lefichach imochra nechosim elu kshi tachas baila. If Lepel she sold these nechosim while she's tachas baila, umeisa tachas baila is yamdu nechosim yad lekeach. And in such a case, Lepel, if she didn't sell it, so the one that wants to keep it is the Baal. So you say to the Baal, no, the Lepel, she was married, and from Desveng he said v'achrayach lepleni. So mainly it goes out of the Baal, but that's only if the achrayach lepleni, the pleni wants to take it out of Yad HaBaal. Masha'enke, he could take it out of the Yad HaBaal, but Lepel, if she went ahead and sold it b'chayi HaBaal, so now it's kilo, just like every time a person says, knows nechasach lepleni v'achrayach lepleni. To someone else, and Lepel, that first one went ahead and sold it, so that sale is a valid sale, and the second person can't take it out. So over here also, the second one can't take it out. Now we're going to learn over here this din hazeh. Lefichach imachrin nechasim eluk shehi tachas baila umeisa tachas baila is yamdu nechasim bal biad alekech. Now over here, it's not so lechura so pashut. Why? Because Lepel, the din is that when a woman is married and she has nechasim, and she goes ahead, and so the din is the nechasim are hers, and the Baal has a right to the payers. That's the original din. The nechasim are hers, and the Baal has a right to the payers. Now, if she dies, so the Baal yarshins her. Masha'en came, if he dies, so the nechasim are her nechasim. These are her nechasim. That's the original din. Now, what happens if she, while she was married, sold these nechasim to someone else? So as far as the peiros, b'chaye habal, while she's still married, so obviously she can't take away the peiros from the Baal. The Baal has a schus in those peiros. The Baal has a schus in those peiros, and as a result of that, she can go ahead and sell the karka to take away the schus of the Baal in the peiros. That's din number one. But nochmer, even if she dies, l'chura, once she dies, so l'chura, the Baal yarshins her. So l'chura, there will be a svara to say that Bishlema, while since she already sold the karka, so we'll say like this: the gufa karka was really sold. The gufa karka was really sold. She sold the gufa karka. The Baal was being oichel peiros because that's his chus while she's married. But Lepel, since now she's no longer married, she died. So Memelis and the gufa karka she sold already. So l'chura, so the gufa karka, the Baal loses, and the Baal doesn't yashn it. But the din is not like that. The din is that the Baal takes that karka. In other words, again, a woman that owns karka, and the Baal is being oichel peiros, and the Baal has a schuz that he's going to yashin this karka. So if she goes ahead and sells this karka, so certainly while she's alive, and they're married, so the Baal continues eating peiros despite the fact that it was sold. Masha'en kain, if she dies, so the Baal could be moitzi this karka miyad al-kuchs. Because since he had a schus to yashin this karka, so she can be mafkia this schus as well. In other words, if he dies, so Memela, the karka is taka hers, so then that kinyan is chal, because Lepel, she sold it to somebody. Masha'enken, if she dies, so then the Baal is moitzim yad al-kuch. We learned this already in Hilchas Ishus. Let's go again. a woman owns karka, so while she's married, the Baal oichel peiros. Now, if she goes ahead and sells this karka, so the Baal continues eating peiros. Now, if she dies b'chaya Baal, so the Baal is meitzim yad al kuches, and it becomes, because the Baal is, that's the din of the Baal, b'nichse ishte is a lekeach, so he's considered a lekeach rishon, and I'll call upon him, the Baal is meitzim yad al kuches, he keeps it. So now, l'chura, we have a case azoy. A woman had karka because she received the karka. And lepel, she said that nechosai loch v'achrayech lepleni. That was he said. He said it to her while she was married. Nechosai loch v'achrayech lepleni. Now lepel, if lepel she was alive and she died. She died while she was married. So the din is it goes lepleni. Because that was the deal. The deal is it shouldn't go to the Baal, it should be lepleni. Nechosei loch v'achrayech lepleni. That's the pashta din. Now, what happens in a case where she went ahead and sold the karka? So there's like four people here involved. There's the original person. The original person gave her the karka while she was married, and then he said achrayech lepleni, and now she went ahead and sold it to somebody else. Now, if she wouldn't have sold it to someone else, so this karka would have gone lepleni. She was married. And nevertheless, if she wasn't married when he gave it to her, and then she got married, so it belongs to the Baal. Since he gave it to her while she was married, so it doesn't, and she dies, so it doesn't go to the Baal, it goes to the lepleni. That's this din. But now lepel, she sold it to someone else. So since l'chura she sold it to someone else, so l'chura, this pleni shouldn't be able to take it out of someone else. The pleni shouldn't be able to take it out of someone else because lepel she sold it. Just like every time when a person says nechosei loch v'achrayech lepleni, so we say that if you sold it in the middle, you can't take it out of that person because lepel was sold. But the mice is over here, the Baal is going to take it out of the person she bought it from. The Baal is going to take it out of the person she bought it from because the Baal has a right. She didn't have a right to sell it to be mafkir from the Baal. So memela, the Baal could really take it away from the person she sold it to. Now, once the Baal takes it away, so now the pleni is going to come along and say, listen, from that person, I wouldn't have been able to take away. But since you took it away, so as far as I'm concerned to you, it's achrayech lepleni. Because if there wouldn't have been that new buyer, so then I would take it away from the Baal. So there's Ruvain and the woman, and there's this Levi, the achrayech lepleni. Now, and there's the Baal. So as far as the Baal is concerned, this Levi could go ahead and take it away from the Baal. As far as the buyer is concerned, Levi can't take it away from the buyer. But on the other end, the Baal could take it away from the buyer, because the Baal, since it's his wife, so the din is that the Baal could take it away from the buyer, because he says that it's my wife, that he's the lekeach rishon. So the question is, once the Baal takes it, so the second person is going to take it. Once the second person is going to take it, so the first buyer is going to say, listen, you have a right to take it from the Baal, but lepel, from me, you don't have a right to take it, because I'm the one that actually bought it. So if I would be a buyer and the Baal wouldn't be involved over here, so it would really be mine. So why should it go to you and not to me? I'm the buyer. So that's the issue over here. So it's Azoy. Lefichach, let's start again. Lefichach, imachra nechasim elu kshehi tachas baila. She went ahead and sold these nechasim while she was tachas baila. And lepel mesa tachas baila, she died tachas baila. So again, if there wouldn't have been a case of a regular nechasim that she owns and she sells it tachas baila, so the baila could take it from the lekuchas. That's din number one. And nochadin, if she wouldn't have sold it and she would have gotten this karka while she was married. And he said, Nechasi lach, v'achrayech lepleni, so then it would go lepleni, because lepel, that would be the din. The pleni would get it out of the Baal. So now the question is, she went ahead and sold these nechasim while she was married. Lefichach imachra nechasim elu, kshehi tachas baila, and then umesa tachas baila. So the Rambam is saying, Yamdu nechasim b'yad lekech. The nechasim should remain by the lekech. Why? The Baal has a right to take it away from the lekech. Because so lepelim yetzi abal miyad lekech mishemachrik shinusua dacharei hasheni dachmeitz miyad abal. So now the second, the achrayech lepleni, will take it away from the Baal. And once this achrayach lepleni takes it away from the Baal, so now the lekeach will go v'lekeach chayzer meisim yad hasheni. The lekeach is going to say to this achrayach lepleni, but I'm the lekeach. Why should you get it before me? The chur am a lekeach. So einachinami, the Baal has the rights before me because he's the Baal. But Rashaikin, once you're taking it away from the Baal, so it's me and you. Is this lekeach and that lekeach? So the lekeach says it's the lekeach and the achrayach lepleni. So the lekeach comes before the achrayach lepleni. The lekeach doesn't come before the Baal, but the achrayach lepleni, the lekeach comes before the achrayach lepleni, and the achrayach lepleni comes before the Baal. So that's the chayzer chalil over here. Hari Hasheni meitz miyad habal, v'alekeach chayzer meitz miyad Hasheni. Shari machlulei, ve'en lo yimashishir rishon. So it'll be constantly going around. In other words, Nachamol. She went ahead and sold it. So the Baal really has a right to take it from the buyer. But once the Baal takes it, so then the achrayach lepleni could take it. Once the achrayach lepleni could take it, so then the buyer could take it. Once the buyer takes it, so the Baal goes back and take it and keeps going around. Now, who's the one that actually spent money on this karka? The only one that actually spent money on this karka was this person that bought it from the Isha. The Isha went ahead and sold it to a lekeach. The aim b'shloshton between the lekeach and the Baal and the person achrayach lepleni. The aim b'shloshton b'sheitzi moment el lekeach. Ulefichach tamid b'yadi. That's why it's tamid b'yadi. So that's this din. This din, if she sold it, or no, so we have two dinim over here. We have a din when a person says to a regular woman that's a pnuya, achrayach lepleni, and then she gets married, so it remains by the Baal. If he says it to an ishasish, achrayach lepleni, and she was already married, so it remains by it goes achrayach lepleni, you take it out of the Baal. And then there's another din that if she sold it while she was b'chayi baila, and she was tachas baila, in this same case, when he told it to her while she was in the suya, achrayach lepleni, he gave it to her, and then he said achrayach lepleni, so then it remains by the lekeach, even though normally a Baal would be able to take it out of miyad the lekeach, but over here, since if the Baal is going to take it out, so then the achrayach lepleni is going to take it out, and when the achrayach lepleni is going to take it out, so the lekeach rishon is going to take it out, so Mele remains by the lekeach rishon because he was the one that spent money. Ma'isa be'echad sha'amar nechosai le'imi, my nechosim should go to my mother, v'achrei li'yorshay, and after she passes away, it should go on to my yorshim. And lepeil v'hoiselei bas nesua, he only had one daughter, and that daughter was married. And lepeil umeisa habas b'chayi baila. This is the bas died while the husband was still alive. U'b'chayi emavia, so the grandmother died, and the nechosai went le'imi. So the grandmother died, the grandmother of this bas died, and she died, and the only thing that was left was his son-in-law, the Baal, which was his son-in-law, and he's the one that's left. V'achar kach mesa askena, so this Canaan now mesa, and now the only one that's left is the son-in-law, which the son-in-law should normally yarshin his wife, which was the daughter. Those nechosim have nothing to do with the Baal. Why? The Ishtay never received it. It's only Ru'uyal Ishtay. Even though he said Va'achrav lebiti to my Yorshim, which was his bas, but Lepel she never received it. Lepel was divided by the mother. And the only time when she would be zeicheret is only after she died. And Lepel, no, she was only zeicheret after she died. And those Lepel she can't be zeicheret. No, since she died before the grandmother, so Memela she was never zeicheret. That's talking about in such a case. If Lepel, this daughter would have left a child, left a ben or a bas, is then hoyyorshim nechosim. Because even though he said liyorshai, but he didn't mean dafka the yorish, a direct yorish. It could be also a yorish of a yorish. And there was a grandchild is also a yorish. Shemashma yorshim bafilo yorish yorshim. Even a yorish is also a yorish. Because sofkos they're inheriting. That's so memela. So if this bas would have had a daughter or son, so then it would go to the achar of liyorshai. Mashenk and lepel, since it doesn't have this a son or a daughter, so therefore it doesn't go to the husband. The husband doesn't go. So you have to find out who is the next yorish of this person that died. And there's this person that said that nechasai leimi va'achrav liyorshai. So whoever the yorish is. So since the bas was never the yorish bepel, so therefore. So it goes to whoever the Yerush is. If the bas left a child, so they're the Yerush. Now, Ve'ilu Omar, Ukshetomus Haskena, Harei Lebiti Miachshav, he wouldn't have said, Ukshetomus Haskena, Va'achreho Lepleni. Achreho Lepleni means that the kinyan is only going to be Bechal after the Thomas Haskena. But if he would have said, Kshetomos Haskena, Harei Lebiti Miachshav, so then, Hoya Bal Yeresh Esum Achar Misasishtei. Because Lepel, since the Gloy Muslim afraid that it was hers already Bechayov, Bechayeha, because it was Gloy Muslim afraid that it was hers while she was still alive, as soon as he said that Nechase Le'imi and Vachreha Lebiti Me'achshov, so now the Baal could Yarshit. Halacha Yud Gimel. Hakesev Nechosov Lebnei Ulachar Mesa. That was the Lashon. He writes a Nechosim to his son, and he says he's giving it to him Ulachar Mesa. So how do you interpret these words? So the din is Harei Aguf Shel Ben Mizman Ashtar. We understand that the guf of the karka that he's giving belongs to the son. V'haperis la'av achiyamus. But Lepeil, he still has a right to the peiris of these nechosim. So in other words, basically when he says hakesev lebnei ulachar meisei, so we understand that it means that the guf is lebnei miachshav, masha'enkin the peiris is the father's achiyamus. Lefichach, because since so it comes out that the ben owns the guf and the father owns the peiris. Lefichach avein yochel miyimker, the father can't sell everything because the guf belongs to the ben. The son can't sell everything because the father has rishus, he has the peiris over it. Now he died and there were peiris that were attached to the ground, and the question is that part of the peiris that belonged to the father, and Memela now all his Yorshim are going to Yashin, the other sons as well, or no, since they were the peiris, so since they're mechubat to the karka, they have a din of the karka. So the din is Harei and Shel Ben. So even though be'emes l'chura they're peiris, and they're not really part of the karka, but since they're mechubat l'karka, so therefore they have a din of a ben. Nipnei shedaiti shel adam kreve etzel b'nei. So Memeli he has a smichas das, and he's giving the son the karka. He gave the son the karka. He only retained for himself the peiris, and even these peiris that remain mechubat l'karka, that's also part of the karka as far as he's concerned, and Memele he gave it away to the ben. So it's the ben's karka and everything that's mechubet to the karka, and the peiris were his. The peiris were his. Now hoya tlushim, if they were already tlushim from the karka, eishi higioli botzer, or they were ready to be cut, to be harvested, so then Harei and Shel Yarshim, then they're no longer part of the karka. That's considered the Yerusha. And Memele Harei and Shel Yarshim. So in other words, if a person has a few sons, he gave a son a piece of karka, and Lepeil he said l'achar meisei. So we say that the guf is his and the peiris belong to the father. Now the peiris belong to the father, so obviously when the father dies, so those peiris that belong to the father go to all his yarshim. That's this din. So the ikar din, the first din is that when a person writes Kaisim nechasav b'nei l'achar meisei, so the son gets the guf, and the father keeps the peiris. And Lepeil, there's another din that the peiris, which are mechuba when the father dies, belongs to the son. That's considered like part of the guf. Masha'enkin, those peiris which are higir li'botzer, or they were tlushim or higir li'botzer, so that's obviously not part of the karka, and therefore that goes to all the yorshim. Now, over ha'av u'mochar, a father went ahead and sold it. So he sold his rights. So the din is mechur nachiyamos. So the mocher achiyamos, and now the lekeach owns the peiris. The father could only sell what he has. So the father owns the peiris, and Memele he sells the peiris. Now lepeil ukshiyamos av, when the father dies, is meitzi ben mi'adalakuchas, because now the gufa, the karka, is his. Now it becomes different. Because when the father dies, and this peiris mechubarim, so we say since the father is karev laben, so Memele he wants that those peiris mechubarim should have a din of karka, and therefore he's giving it to the ben. But now that the lekeach owns the peiris, it's not the father anymore; it's the lekeach, and by the lekeach he's not karev itzel laben. So if Lepeil, when the father dies, and now the lekeach has to give back the karka to the ben. He has to give back the karka to the ben, but he's not going to give back the peiris mechubarim, because the peiris mechubarim are peiris, and that's his. He's a lekeach, and he doesn't have that kar of etzel ben. So memela, it's going to have a different din. That's this din. Ukshiyom su'av meitzi ben miyad alakuchas. Now, if there were peiros mechubarim, so we don't say that there's krei ve'etzel b'nei. There's no b'nei over here because there's a lekeach. Is shaman oisen lekeach, so we assess it to the lekeach. V'neis na ben d'mei, and the ben has to pay the d'mei of the peiros because the karka is his, but the peiros aren't his. Now hoya tlusha be'shehigiu libatzer, so then it's harein shalikech. Then it's pashut that it's harein shalikech because it's his. In other words, even if they're not tlusha be'shehigiu libatzer, it's his. But lepeil over there you can't separate it, so mainly you have to be sham d'meim, and you sham d'meim agav the karka. Masha'ikir over here, since they're higiu libatzer or the tlushim, so they belong to the lekech because the lekech has a kinyan peiros. Now, over haben u'macher, the son really shouldn't have been selling it, but the son owns the gufa karka, and lepeil the peiros aren't his. Now, over haben u'macher is ein lo lekech klum achiyom asav. Until the father dies, the son has nothing. Now, mocher haben over haben u'macher ein lo lekech klum achiyom asav. Mocher haben b'chayav lepeil the son, the same story. The son went ahead and sold it b'chayav, which he shouldn't have, and he only owns the gufa karka. And lepeil umes haben, then the son died. V'achar kach mesoav, and then the father died. Lepeil, the son owned the gufa karka. The son owned the gufa karka, and the father owned the peiros. Is the din is k'shiyom mesoav, when the father dies, kana lekech. She'ein la'av el peiros, v'kinyan peiros ain't a kikinyan aguf. In other words, if kinyan peiros would be kikinyan aguf, so that would really be able to prevent for the ben to be able to sell the guf when the father has a kinyan peiros. In other words, the father has a kinyan peiros and the son has a kinyan aguf. So we're saying that the father's kinyan peiros doesn't prevent the son from being able to send his kinyan aguf. So even though lepeil, he never really received the guf. In other words, he sold the peiros, he sold the guf b'chayav, and lepeil, he died b'chayav. So he never really received the guf. But nevertheless, he owned the guf, b'chayav, even though the father was the one that owned peiros, and therefore the sale that he had of that guf, b'chayav, even though he never really received the guf, nevertheless, that sale is a valid sale, and therefore the person that bought it from him, after the father dies, and Mameli is no longer taking peiros, so that guf and the peiros go to this buyer. That's again, let's read it again. Mocher aben b'chayav, the father sold it while the father was alive, and lepeil umes aben, the son died, so he never really got the guf. And v'achar kach mesoav, and then the father died. So the question is, what's this leker that bought a guf that he never really, that at that point in time he didn't have any peiros, and even the seller also never really had anything. Nevertheless, when the father dies, is kana lekech. The lekech is kana. She'ein la'av el peiros, because the father only has peiros. Kinyan peiros ain't a kinyan aguf. But if kinyan peiros would be kinyan aguf, so kinyan peiros would be kinyan aguf, that would prevent that the smechira of the son to this person of the guf, which the son never really lived, to be able to ever have the kinyan of this guf. So Mimela, that sale wouldn't have been a good sale. But since Lepel Kinyan Peiros Lavke Kinyan Aguf, so we say that the son did have a Kinyan Aguf on it, and since he had a Kinyan Aguf, so he was able to sell it. And Lepel, even though he died b'chayav, Lepel, the sale is a good sale. Halacha Yudalet. Matnas Bori shekosed bo mahayem ulachar misa. That was the lashon of the matana. So the din is harei kematnas shchivmira, which is eine keina el ulachar misa. Shemash medvarim elu shaval pi shekona aguf mahayem. Whereas the Maisa Kinya is happening now, to actually use it, to be able to have, there's the Maisa Kinya is happening now, but the Vizecha and Eichel Peiris is only Lachar Misa. So that's how we interpret the words in the Matnas Bari of Mehayem Lachar Misa. Halacha Tezvov. Shtar Matana Shekosabo, Shekona Soda Plainis, Shekona Plainis Soda Plainis, Lachar Misa. So he writes that he's being makna the Soda Plainis Lachar Misa. Now, lepel, you can't be makna lachar misa because ein shtar lachar misa. But the point is that since over here it says that there's a zman in the shtar, there was a zman in the shtar. So once there's a zman in the shtar, so that zman is telling us that he's really being maknit mi'achshov and lachar misa. In other words, if it would be mamish lachar misa, so taka wouldn't work because en kinyan lachar misa, en shtar lachar misa. Mashenkin, since there's this Zman, so that Zman is Mechiach, that he doesn't really mean that the Kinyan should be Chal Lachar Misa. He means that the Kinyan should be Chal Mi'achshav Ulachar Misa. And that's why they wrote a Zman. That's this din. Shtar Matona Shekosabe, Sheyikna Plainis, saw the Plainis Lachar Misa, Ben Shahoya B'Shtar Kinyan, Ben Shahoya B'Kinyan, it said whether there was a Maisa Kinyan as well, or wasn't a Maisa Kinyan, or B'Kiv and Shekosabe Zman. Since it says Zman in the Shtar, Ubezman Zeh Chai Hoya, he was alive during that Zman, is Azman Mechiach Shemichayim Hiknalei. So that Zman shows that that's the Kinyan is Chal on that Zman. Ve'in Izeicha Lachar Misa. And it was the Maisa Kinyan, just like we learned before, and the Locha Yudal, the Matnos Bori, which says Mahayim Lachar Misa. So the Kinyan was Chal Mahayim, and it's Lachar Misa. So Al Der Azeh, a Shtar, which has a Zman on it, so it's like as if it said Mahayim Lachar Misa. Meil Shemichayim Hiknalei, Ve'in Izeicha Lachar Misa. She'ilo Yibedaita L'Haknas L'Bishtar Zel Lachar Misa. If Be'em is the intention of the shtar was that the whole akno should happen lachar misa, not only the schia but the actually kinyan should be lachar misa, lehaya kesa bizman. Lefichach aval pisha ein kosa ba mihayim lachar misa like in halacha yudalit, but since it says azman is kein lachar misa. V'zeh shekesim b'chol ha'matonis v'amemkoris meyachshav. Even though we have a zman in our shtar, so why do we have to add the word miyachshav? L'chura, we're learning now that once it says zman in the shtar, it's ki'ilu, it says miyachshav. Says einachanami aval pishiyesh b'shtar azman is only l'arviach hadavar kesim beiv aval pisha nitzorch. It's not really essential, but it's only yeser revach. So it should say clearly that it's mehayim. But the emes is that since it says zman, there's no need to say mehayim. Halacha tezay bori shenos matona. And he because of mishtar michayim ubamovis. He adds the words ubamovis. He doesn't say lachar misa. He says bachayim ubamovis. Michayim ubamovis. So there is harezu matona gemura michayim. We're not considering it a matona lachar misa. Shari kosabe michayim. Ay v'zeh shekosabe ubamovis. Why is he adding bamovis? K'mishayimar me'atav adelim ukmei nei ashtar uzeh. He doesn't really mean movis. He means bachayim mamovis and knows this is an eternal thing. This is le'olam. Halacha Yud Zayin, Hatzadikim Hagmurim, V'anshi Maisa, Le'yikablu Matona Me'odom, Elebeitchem B'Hashem Baruchu, Lei B'Nedivim, V'alinamar V'seinei Matona Zchiach. Slikulu Hilches Chil Matona, B'Sayayta D'Shmaya.